I'm going to be looking at the resources and strategies, and I want to make you aware of what we hold and some of the ways you can search for flexible and successful searching. These are the frequently asked questions that we get. Who was the original homeowner? And I think, Kaye and Carmel have given you plenty of clues as to what might gear you in that direction. When was the house built? What was the house name and how do I find it? What are its origins? Because people give it some sort of sacredness that I think Carmel and Kaye pointed out, really it doesn't have. It's just a matter of whim, like naming your cat. Are there photographs of the house? And what sort of life was associated with this place? Essentially, you need to use a combination of the following. The property title. I think there is no question you need to go to Kaye to sort that one out. The building register, which Carmel showed us, which may or may not be available. The electoral rolls. The Queensland Directories. Trove newspapers. And if you don't know how to search Trove, and we're not going to have much time for it today, go up to level 3, and if the staff are wearing an I Love Trove badge, which is kind of a religion amongst us, you should have a word to them. Also clipping files, which we'll be talking about as well. Now, what normally happens, people come to the desk and say, I want to look at the post office directories. What they're hoping is that a name's going to suddenly pop up in a street, and that's when the house was definitely built and someone's resident there. There is not a directory for every year. They're intermittent to 1949, and residents are recorded only until 1939. The street number is rarely listed, and people are very disappointed when they discover this because, they somehow think that it will be there. The exception is in some city areas, but in outer suburbs and towns, the street is listed later, if at all. So you're just not going to get it in country towns. Directories record the residents, not the owners, and of course people were often renting out properties, or somebody was occupying the family home other than the owner. As I said, people look for the first appearance of that name in a street, but in many cases are disappointed. Directories are on fiche and CD-ROM. Can I suggest that keyword searching on the CD-ROM is considerably easier? We have a guide, and you should have my notes, by the way, and I've added more in the notes than I've got on the slides. And I've given you the address for the Family History Guide on directories. And Rod Fisher's written a very important article about the background, the problems and the history of those directories. That is also online, linked to that information sheet. And that's definitely worth reading. Directories record only the head of the household, not all of its residents. And they show the residents in the order of house position in the street. That's not alphabetical, it's according to where the house is in the street. And they may give, electoral rolls may give a more precise address earlier than you'll get in a directory. And one of the wonders of the CD-ROMs is that for those years that we have them, done by Queensland Family History, 1903, 1913, 1922, 34, 41, 49 and 59, you can do a street search, and that can be very useful. Some of the electoral rolls are on Ancestry, some are on fiche, some are on film, and often you're moving between the two to narrow things down as to when somebody might have been somewhere. Again, see the Family History Guide on electoral rolls, and the address for that again is on that sheet or sheets. Now we're going to look for a place called Loma in Northgate. The information we were given was, and of course you know that the information you're given is not always the accurate information, but we're used to that. The house was built in 1914. It had only one owner for a long time, at least 40 years. The family had a pioneering background, and it was built from wood milled by a Bundaberg firm for a family. Who owned this house? Okay, when you go to the Queensland Post Office directories, there are no streets listed for Northgate. As I think both Kaye and Carmel have alerted you to, sometimes, as in the case of Wynnum, there's just a list of names. But again, using those electoral rolls that we've got on CD-ROM, we could just put in love and let it roll out, and we could get 11 names. And as it turned out, only one of those names was on the 1914 electoral roll, and certainly not in the Queensland Directory. So this is what we do. In place of living love, nothing before it, because it might be a house name, but when people were living with other people, they might put the name of that person with whom they were living. Nothing after it, because it could be love and another street. So if you put Love Street, you exclude those people. So you want it not at the beginning of the field, not at the end of the field, but anywhere in the field. And you get 11 names. Now, Love and Isles, remember we saw that Isles owned a lot of that area of John Leckie's land. Well, Isles and Love was a very well-known auctioneering firm. And of course, their names are going to be all over the place. Isles Lane, Isles this, and Love this, that and the other as well. And there are 5 places in Queensland other than Northgate that have a Love Street or a Love Lane, including Isles and Love Adelaide Street. So this is why you would put anywhere in the field. But what distinguishes Northgate when you bring it up is that you can see the subdivision and the division, and you know that it's Nunda and Lily. So you then simply put in Love with the subdivision Nunda, the division Lily, and you will get everyone in that street who is, of course, enrolled. So Love and then Nunda and Lily. And there they are, the 11 names. No house name or number for most of them. Bonnie Bray is there. But notice that you see Buckle and Love. So you've got to make sure that you don't have anything before the street name or after the word of the street. Now we're going to I know that we're riveted by all of these examples, but what I really want to show you, what's happened there? That's very strange. Okay, good. So because there are a number of Love Streets in Queensland, search with Love, choose the option anywhere in the field, house names or the name of the owner with whom somebody is staying can precede it. But Barlow is another funny one. Now, the areas around Clayfield, Albion, Ascot, as you may or may not know, as soon as you add Ascot, the value of your house goes up astronomically. And there have been a number of boundary changes. Now, Barlow Street is one street, and there's only one of them, as far as I can see, in Queensland. But people give 5 different variations as to the suburb. So Clayfield, Ascot, Albion, Albion Park, Albion Heights, it goes on. But they all have the same subdivision and division. So can you see how that can be useful at picking out a street? Not just the word that is the street, but also just the subdivision and division. So 5 different suburb names for one street. I reckon that's pretty good. So we couldn't pick up this one family on the Queensland directories, but once we got them in 1922, and we had 11 family names, it's a very simple thing to go to the fiche and go through alphabetically as they're listed and cross out every single one of them. And only one was left, and they were sky rings. And if you know anything about the sky rings, you'll know that they are amongst the very earliest people in Brisbane. And there was Lily Rose, Sarah Ellen and Violet Emily. For some reason, the mother who bought the land was not listed. An electoral roll will differ from a post office directory because it will list all of the people of voting age. It's only the head of the family on a directory. And it gives a more specific address than the post office directory did. We get Love Street, Northgate, but only Northgate's available on the directory, and they weren't there. Notice that no house names listed. It's pretty, I found most of them are on the detailed plans, but you certainly can't rely on that. And it's the earliest record at SLQ of the sky rings in Northgate. That is what a directory looks like. And I don't know how clear that is on the screen, but notice that the streets are listed alphabetically regardless of the suburb. So Love Street, Bulimba, Love Street, Northgate. Note how you get the right side and the left side, and you get the intersecting streets. And mind you, and of course if you read Rod Fisher's article, you'll be aware they don't always get that right either. So it's a guide, but treat it as a guide, not the absolute factual picture of it. So 1926 was the first year the Northgate streets were actually named. Many rely on finding that a name in the street for the first time, but it's not reliable. And we know already that the sky rings are recorded in Love Street on the 1914 roll. 1939, so you're talking about a fairly small window for a lot of areas. 1939 was the last year private residences were listed in the post office directories. The directories themselves go to 1949, but this is the last year for those private residences. And of course, Emily, the mother or widow, has died, and now Sarah Ellen is listed. Not her sisters, but Sarah Ellen. Skyring. Trove. You need to be, if you don't know about Trove, you really need to go upstairs and talk to the staff on level 3, especially down in the at the back area, because we live on it. There are 3 sections here you need to be aware of. Firstly, up at the top, and we've got a couple of ladies who've devoted their lives to this. Yes, I'm going to have to work out how this... Oh, gosh. What did I do that was naughty? How do I actually retrieve this? I think I need someone to sort this out. I was actually just trying to point it and I've kind of lost it. But there are 3 sections of Trove you need to be aware of. Right at the top, on the right side, is something called the tags. Sorry about that. And I was just up to this one here, Trove. Okay, notice up along the top bar circled as tags. And we have ladies here who've been busy tagging all sorts of things that will help you. Newspapers, the old newspapers, up to 1954, are a fantastic way to search. And of course, pictures, photos and objects are also excellent. As I said, we haven't got the time to spend on this, but see the staff. Now, I want to link these people to Northgate, so I put in Trove, in all these words, Skyring and Northgate. I get a stack of hits because these are obviously not the poverty-stricken. And we get a first hit here where we find that a young man, Private Lowes Henry Skyring, has died during World War I. And it tells us he's the grandson of the late H.A. Skyring, Henry Albert, Sawmills, Bundaberg, and Mrs. Skyring of Northgate. So we've established a link between the house in Northgate, or the Skyrings in Northgate, and Bundaberg and its sawmills. We still haven't got to the name that we're looking for, though. But then we come to an obituary of Mrs. Emily Skyring. Now, she is the widow of Henry Albert, who died in 1904. She died in 1926. Now, this would have originally been in the Bundaberg Daily News, but of course the Maryborough paper has been digitised, so naturally I grabbed it from there. And it tells us that she is of Northgate. It goes back to her early origins. She came out in 1853 on one of the early ships, not long after Moreton Bay was really opened to people settling here as free people. And Henry Albert Skyring established the sawmill at Bundaberg. So we've now got a couple of references that link the Skyring, or Mrs. Skyring of Northgate, to the Bundaberg sawmills. So how do we find the house name? Now, there are several places it might be recorded, and I've put that all in your notes. It could be in the Trove newspapers. It could be on the Brisbane City Council's detailed plan. It could be in Queensland Directories or on electoral rolls, and it can be on the home, the gate, the door, the veranda wall. But not all houses were named. Names could change or move with the owner. People could even move to another street and bring the house name with them. And they were not registered. They were a matter of whim, like naming your cat. And if you wanted to change it, you could. And so when we start looking around about 1914, and by the way, the Skyrings were not on the electoral roll for 1913. So with that guide of 1914, I started searching for Skyrings and Northgate. And the Mrs. Skyring, Roseclear, Love Street, will not be at home today in August 1914. Put that in the paper today and see what happens. But they did let people know when they would be at home and wouldn't be at home. And there are also lots of other lovely little social messages. They're off on holidays to Coolangatta for a month or two. I mean, would you do that today? I don't think so. And of course, Mrs. Skyring, we're told when she dies. And of course, once again, we've got that link, Northgate, Roseclear, Bundaberg, sawmills. But we're looking for Loma Linda. Okay, and here they are actually on the electoral roll in 1941. They were on all of these CD-ROMs actually until 59. But the house name's changed. It's no longer Roseclear, it's Rose Ellen. Now, when you look at their names, like Lily Rose, Rose May, and Sarah Ellen, it's actually combining all the daughters' names in one way or another. They loved roses. Roseclear means bright rose. Now the house is Rose Ellen. And note too that Noel Skyring hasn't put the name of the house down. Now, members of the same household will not record their address in the same way. My father always put the number. My mother always put corner of. See, if you tried to put the number in, you would never find them together. And that's one of the reasons why you just put the name of the street without anything before or after it. Now, there are changes to this property over time. Now, this is extremely superficial compared to what Kaye would do. I'm sure that Kaye would absolutely boggle your mind with what happened to that land. But after Emily died in 1926, Septimus Davis, in a street nearby, was selling off the land under Skyring's estate. And of course, we get a wonderful idea not only of the size of the land, but all of its facilities that people value. 5 minutes from the station, excellent views, and it's got gas, water, electric light, a generous train service and motor buses. What more could you want? Except that it's the coolest suburb of Brisbane with well-formed streets and good drainage, because a lot of them weren't well-formed streets at all. But what's amazed me is how many of the coolest suburbs there were. And again, we're getting another property change. Again, nothing like what Kaye would be able to do for you, but this is from the paper. And of course, Rose May has died. And we're seeing the land being sorted out again with subs and portions that boggle my brain and resubs. Now, one other small, tiny little detail. Note that Rose May is a spinster, Sarah Ellen is a spinster, Lily Rose is an unmarried woman. Does anyone know what's happened there? She's divorced. Oh, you know, I told you, Don. She's divorced. She's given up her married name. Okay, we still haven't got to Loma Linda. And we've already seen that it's had two names, Rose Clear and Rose Ellen. But we've got clipping files upstairs, and they often, this is up on level 4 in John Oxley, and they can provide articles that go beyond the limits of Trove that sometimes can tell you what you want. And there is a picture of Loma Linda. Now, that's nothing like what they would do today with it if it were in the Courier Mail's real estate section. It would be glamorous beyond words, but this is 1981. It tells us here that it's a Spanish version of Beautiful Hill, and they don't name the family, but we've worked it all out. The family for whom it was built owned many hectares of land with great views out to the bay. And it says they owned sawmills along the Queensland coast, and their timber was hand-picked at their Bundaberg mill and railed to Nunda, and there it went by dray to Love Street. Part of the old stables has been converted to a lock-up garage and a garden house. So finally we've found this link. They'll tell us only 2 families owned it, and obviously the second family changed its name yet again. And guess what it's called today? They've gone back to Rose Ellen, but there you go. Now, people want to know about who lived in their house before them. And the Skyrings are a very interesting family. Daniel Skyring, the father of Henry Albert, the father-in-law of Emily, who purchased the land and the property, was amongst the first purchase of land in Brisbane. When you go to the files or ask for the files, and it's a manual request, they're organised alphabetically by surname, and there's a lot there on the Skyrings. Daniel Skyring arrived in 1933, came to Moreton Bay in 1844, and Henry Albert was the first of his children to actually be born in Moreton Bay. Second of his children. Emily Jones arrived on the Parsee, that's his wife, and widow, who purchased the land in 1853. And Henry had interests in Bundaberg amongst lots of others. So that house is actually a link right back to the very early days of Brisbane via that family. And that's a great deal of its interest. You're tuning in to an early part of Brisbane's history with that family. Now, there are also photographs upstairs and houses, and they are organised under things like Brisbane residences, and they could be by letter or they could be by the surname or the name of the house. And it could be by the suburb, Kedron, but I don't think there's anything under Kedron specifically. It can be in Trove newspapers, articles and advertisements, and Trove Pictures has got images not only from the State Library but anyone else contributing. So Trove is a very good option. You need to go up if you haven't learned how to use it. There's also Google Street View, has a series of 3 images over time. We actually looked at someone's property yesterday and one for 2015's up. There's also the Frank Corley collection. Frank Corley in the late 60s and early 70s went around photographing houses in cities and towns all over Australia. And then he would sell those photos to people as inserts in calendars or as greeting cards to other people. And they would just slip the photograph into the little insert holes. Those he didn't sell are at the State Library. And some are online, but more organised by suburb, they need to be requested. And people do find their homes. I'm very careful about saying that because people get distressed. Are you one who found it?
I was just going to say that the Annerley Historical Group has actually gone through and identified a lot of the surviving photos and matched them up with the surviving houses too. So if anyone was in that area, it's very useful.
Okay, Annerley's got a huge project on with this, and they've linked it to the detailed plans, and it's almost a religious fervour out there, and they're moving into areas around it. So if you're in the Annerley area, contact the local historical group. How can they do that?
Google it. I don't know.
Oh, good old Google.
I'm not one of the devotees.
Yeah, it's Annerley Stevens History Group.
Okay, lovely. And of,
Google them, and they've finished the Stevens, not the whole Stevens area, but Annerley, Yeronga, a little bit of Maruka.
I know, we see Dennis in here regularly on his mission. And that obviously leads to that final point that local history societies are great for articles and photos and for doing fantastic projects like that. There is the house, Loma Linda, Rose Clear, Rose Ellen. It's a huge house. It sits perched on a ridge, and what you can't pick out in the fence is there are little octagon pieces of wood on the, you don't see those red pylon little things. There are lots of little special wooden features. It was, obviously something they really wanted to do well in timber. But here are other options for photographs. You can pick up advertisements in papers. Now, this is just an interwar house, Courier Mail, 5th of July 1952. And of course, they've lied about the number of rooms. Why you would lie about something like that, I don't know, but they did. Then Cawley took a photograph of it in the late 1960s. And of course, today we have Google, and we can look at it in the Street View. So there are a number of options for looking at photographs of houses. Now, when was it built? That house we've just looked at became the subject of a Supreme Court case because the subcontractor wasn't being paid, Arthur Austin Bresso. And it tells us there quite a bit of information. The building contract was the 22nd of February 27. The owner made payments April, May, June 27. The building register tells us the application was the 27th of April. On the electoral roll at that address in 1928. Now, there isn't a 1927 electoral roll, but we know, obviously, when the house is built, it has been finished because of this case. It was first in the Post Office Directory in 1928, 1929. But we can see that, in fact, it was built earlier than that. And, of course, there's not going to be a court case over every house. Just going back to Google and linking back to what Carmel showed you about their various styles of houses, we can see the post-war period, the austerity house, and we can also see there an example of it. But we can go to Google and see what it used to look like. So just remember your house on houses and advertisement on Google Street View. That's what it looked like in January 2008. An elderly couple were in a nursing home. That's what it looked like in 2009. So we can actually see its evolution over the years. And that's just Google Street View. Going up to the slider on the left side and moving across the dates. Estate maps. Now, this is what the library has huge numbers of. And when they preserve and digitise them, they will be more freely available online. They just require preservation and digitisation first. They indicate when an area was available for residential development, an idea of the desirable features, and they show the main landmarks and early settlers in the local sketch, which provides a sense of context. Inducements to purchase included free transport and luncheon. It's not like the free chook. Was it the good guys who used to give us free chooks? I can't remember. But here's one for Albion Hill. Now, we can see this off Sandgate Road. Camden Street and Ford Street are actually named. Old Sandgate Road, incidentally, is now Bonnie Avenue. So we're seeing that this is on the market here, October 1899. But see the local sketch right over on the right. We're going to take a bit more of a look at that. Because when we look at it, it shows us the land to be sold, but it also shows us the people who own land around it, like Mrs. McCrossan, James Milne, the Petrie Brickworks, James Campbell, the Duracs, Whitecliffe, the Post Office, Albion Station, Lutwyche Station and the Wilmington Estate. So it's good for giving you a sense of an area at a particular time, the owners and the context of that land that's being sold. Glenkedron. Now, in case somebody hasn't noticed, we've been looking at 6th Avenue. And you can see that the early avenues up to one side of 8th Avenue went on the 17th of November 1917. And Glenkedron took its name from the property down here on the left, Glenkedron. And that was owned by one of the Loves. Isles and Love names you'll see all the time because they were auctioneers. But look at what they're pushing as the great things. Look, this is the highest, healthiest and breeziest situation, not Northgate. And the Kedron Park tram terminus is there, the Wooloowin Eagle Junction railway stations are there, and there are water and gas. The roads have been well formed and beautifully gravelled because they only did the centres of the streets until the 1960s. I noticed that electricity doesn't come into it. But who are the auctioneers? Isles and Love. And we're becoming very familiar with those names in that area. There are also card indexes up on level 4 in John Oxley. Society and Home Magazine, Architectural and Building Journal, and the Old Subject Catalogue. Let's look at what we might find. The Architectural and Building Journal tell us when, and this is pretty hard to read, under Eric Trewern right at the bottom, he is putting out a tender for 6th Avenue Kedron, and this is in September 1930. October 1930, it's closed. That's on the right side. And J. Hayward has been accepted. So we now know by October 1930 they're ready to build. And the Courier Mail provides tenders too, but it only says Kedron, so we can't be really certain that it's the 6th Avenue property until we line it up with the Architecture and Building Journal. And there is Derrington. Aren't you relieved to see it at last? There it is. And the house name is on the gate. It's not on the post office directory, not on the electoral rolls, but it is on the gate. And you can see the lounge room and Mrs. Packer's bedroom. Mrs. Packer's room did not change between 1931 and 2003. And here we find them coming onto the Queensland Directories. 6th Avenue, Glenkedron. It was always called Glenkedron in those days. Right side from Licky Road. George Axelson's wife was the one, when they were trying to get their into their house in 1927, the subcontractor took legal action. So he's up there on the corner. Then William Packer, and there it goes down through to Glenkedron Lane, and then it goes up on the other side. But it's first in the Directories in 34. The house was finished in March 1931. William and Margaret Packer were on the roll in 1931 at that address. They actually lived elsewhere in Kedron, but they were obviously pretty quick off the mark to get it changed to 6th Avenue. Note, no house name or street numbers. What I'm trying to say is it might be there, but don't get your hopes up. Architectural plans. Some are digitised and online, and they include Stombuco, Dodds and many others, but most of them are at the Friar Library, and you can get a Google map of Queensland with an overlay detail. And I've put the address for that into your notes. There's much more in your notes than on the slides. And obviously most workers' houses did not have an architect. Now these are some of the house plans on level 4 and online, and they go over quite a period of time there. And so that's the Queensland Deposit Bank. You see what you can buy. They're like pattern books. Redicut Homes. We've all seen these houses. Workers' Dwelling Scheme in 1909. You still had to be fairly comfortably off. You had to possess an unencumbered title in your own name, not already be a homeowner, have a total income exceeding £416 a year, and it was just to be for yourself and family, nothing else. And there is the first workers' dwelling. And that's in Surrey Street. I got that out of a newspaper that I had saved for something else in 1989, and that's what it looks like today. It's on the Queensland Heritage Register. A little bit critical, I noticed, of the improvements. War service homes, and these have been liberally tagged by people. If you also go to one search with war service homes, you'll find lots there as well. And you can see that we've got books that have been digitised online. Queensland Housing Commission, very important after the war. And you can find reports of this in the under Department of Housing, Queensland Votes and Proceedings. Search using the phrase Queensland Housing Commissions. And they have got lots of books. Many suburban images online, and some includes house plans. Street name changes, one of the heroes of street name changes, Kerry Raymond, is actually here today, and that's the address. And I think I've got that address on your notes as well. And it was very, very common, I think, as Carmel pointed out, around about 1938 to 1940. And you can have a look at that in some of the other resources that I've listed on there as well. Okay, but some of the lovely books of the period which tell us what it was like. Homemaker's book actually opens with a picture of, wait for it, Derrington. And yet another picture of Derrington. This must have been Eric Trewerne's favourite building of that year. And you can find out about the Packers. They're fairly well known. They had tanneries and a wool scour over where Craigsley is now. Joseph Packer brought the family out from Gloucestershire, arrived in 1878, aged 25, at the cost of £1, and started Packer and Knox Tannery. And they moved the tannery to Hamilton Road in 1898. His son William built, yes, you've got it, Derrington. And we can see the land passing through, land and also money through the family by 1929 as people are dying. And there are two of the Williams' daughters, Ivy Jean, who married and lived in Melbourne, and Vera May, lighting a soldier's cigarette during the war. And there's stacks more, of course. You know, how they went at Somerville House in concerts, all the local social events. And again, when William Packer dies, we can see the property passing to his daughters. There are lots of things on researching house histories, and they are in your notes. And just in reference to the Brisbane City Council booklet, Carmel said there's updated information in Annabelle's guide, and it should be there on your notes about having a look at those hyperlinks. So the strategy of tracing a house history varies according to your purpose, available information and where it is, and you need to use at least two sources for verification. As you can see, we've got a stack of material to help you, but you are still better off starting at the Titles Office or at the Brisbane City Council, so you're well armed when you come to ask us for more information. That's it.